I'm actually just going to go and flip on the record actually right now. Oh,
I
we
did.
are. So
We're
perfect.
good.
Thanks. Okay, awesome. Well, again, I want to thank you guys all for tuning in. As Elizabeth said, my name is Ben Tice, owner and director of School Marketing. We're a small digital marketing agency here located in the Twin Cities, and we help small business owners and businesses with digital marketing, like you've probably heard of, with web dev, SEO, SEM, social media. But my actually favorite part of my job is we get to partner with great organizations like the Reserve and put on cool workshops like this to kind of teach you the different types of aspects or topics or strategies in digital marketing. And so today we're going to be talking about understanding Google Analytics. This is kind of our 1.0 course. So we're going to be going into, again, what is analytics? How do we analyze analytics? How do we actually utilize that data? And how do we then potentially kind of take it to the next step? So as Elizabeth said, as well as if you have any questions, please put them in the chat bar. I'll be, again, kind of giving my presentation and paying attention to Elizabeth, and she might flag me down if we have a pertinent question. Otherwise, there might be some that we will be able to do at the end as well when we get to the end of the presentation. And always, if you don't get your question answered, please feel free that you'll have my contact information. We'll be sending out a PDF copy of this as well as a recording of this exact presentation to you. So you can always reach out or always go back to the material as well. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to be talking about understanding Google Analytics, really kind of our 1.0 course. Really what we're going to be going into is what is Google Analytics? Then, again, kind of navigating Google Analytics, understanding where we should kind of go, and there's some changes that have been happening. Also, then we're going to be kind of really diving into kind of what we've dubbed as awesome analytics. What are kind of the 7 or 8 kind of core metrics that you're going to see on almost every report that you do? And how can you obviously understand those, but then apply those to your strategy, to your vetting, to your review of analytics and all these metrics. And then throughout the presentation, we'll also be talking about strategy. How do we actually utilize these and kind of implement those further into our marketing strategy or our business or website specifically? So the first thing is understanding what is Google Analytics. So the first thing is to know is that there actually are, again, right now there's kind of 2 different versions. There's kind of the normal version, which all of us would kind of see, just, again, Google Analytics kind of universal. And then there's kind of a Google Analytics 4.0. 4.0 is, again, you might be seeing some verbiage around this. You might even see some of this as if you're starting a new analytics account. And really just to know is Analytics 4.0 is kind of the future a little bit, but is mainly going to be helping with kind of apps and cross device. It's kind of a new way that Google is going to be kind of implementing this. Now, this is really kind of brand new. So there's a lot of people that aren't using 4.0. We are going to be actually coming out with a presentation later this year on 4.0, but I just want to make sure that we understand that we will be kind of covering more of the 3.0, if you will, or the Google Analytics Universal. Pretty much if you have Google Analytics right now, this is the version that we're going to be talking about. But it's important just to kind of know the different versions out there. And the reason for that, Google's always trying to, again, get better. And really the new one isn't necessarily going to be drastically different. It's just going to be sometimes, again, just like anything with Google, as they update things, the user experience changes. Sometimes we get new analytics. Sometimes things get sunset, all of that kind of stuff. But again, I would honestly say about 99% of you are going to be using the standard, which even we use right now. And everyone, again, most likely is going to be using that. So know that that's the version that we're going to be kind of talking about today. To also understand that Google Analytics is completely free. It's offered by Google. Now, obviously, they're tracking and they're using some of that data, but to use the software is completely free. So it's actually the #1 analytics software used in the world because, again, how powerful it is and the cost of it being free and really the ease of use of getting it installed and then applying it. Also, it's important to know that a code is implemented. You have to make sure that you get Google Analytics installed. Now, again, if you're using a DIY builder like Weebly or Wix or Squarespace, it's pretty much just taking your UA code that you get when you register for Google Analytics and plopping it in. If you're using WordPress, there might be some ways, there's some plugins that you can use. There are some, again, you can actually just plop in the code yourself if you know what kind of you're doing when it comes to that. But the reason I mention this is that Google Analytics cannot retroactively go get data. That's a super important thing to know is that, again, they can't retroactively get data, which means that if you don't properly install your Google Analytics account, if you rebuild your website and forget to reinstall it, if it comes broken for some reason, is any data or any time that lapsed by the time you fix that is unfortunately lost. We can't re-get that data. That's why I'm just saying it's super important. Two things. One is, even if you're not prepared to go super in depth on Google Analytics, you want to make sure that you install Google Analytics and that it's running as soon as possible. The other thing is just to then make sure that it's continuously running. And if you're looking at Google Analytics on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis, again, at least on some regularity, you should be able to kind of, again, see that with the reports. If it's not running, obviously everything's going to come back as zeros. So one thing to kind of look at is when you go into Google Analytics, there are going to be five main kind of components that we're going to be kind of looking at here, besides just the main kind of central analytics screen that we're looking at. So I should say five kind of contributing components. So the first is your admin section. We'll get in that in just a second, but this is where you're going to be doing, again, all of your settings. If you need to go get your UA code or your tracking code, if you need to let someone use your login, or excuse me, use your account or give access to them, you're going to be able to kind of do that. Number two is the accounts analytics menu. This one's going to be important. What's kind of nice is there are mainly kind of four, but kind of five categories of different reports. We're going to be mainly going over the four of them, and I'll get into that in just a second. But this is where all the predetermined reports are. This is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time and flipping between kind of reports until maybe you get to the point where you're actually creating customized reports and creating a customized dashboard. That's something that we're not going to really kind of get into today, but that is something we talk about in our other presentation. But again, knowing that there is probably the majority of what you need to know is going to be in these predetermined reports, and you're going to find those with box number 2 there. Number 3 is the date range. This is a super powerful one in that, so obviously you're going to tell the system where, again, what date range do I want to pull the data from? Obviously pretty simple. But the cool feature is that you can actually compare this data. This really gets helpful when you're starting to actually apply strategy, and as you're also doing marketing efforts and applying a value to those marketing efforts to see if those are actually again becoming fruitful and working for you. So for instance, you could compare again February 2021 to January 2021. You could compare February 2021 to February of 2020. Obviously, your analytics would have had to have been running for over a year to capture that data. But again, this is honestly where rubber hits the road. So all the things that we're talking about here today, it's important to take them at face value, of course, but really where rubber hits the road and where we can actually see improvements or, again, opportunities, again, to improve, or if we've seen some decreasements, is with the compare feature, is being able to compare quarters over quarters, year over year. At the end of every year, I go through my analytics and I look at all of, like, for instance, last year, 2020, and then I compare it to all of 2019 to kind of see all of our analytics. It's super cool. And you can see here that you get the blue and the orange lines showing you the current and the past. It does the math for you, and we'll get into what all those mean. Those are kind of the awesome analytics. But green is obviously improved, red is obviously declined. And so we can actually kind of see that math there and kind of be able to see that there. This is, again, where you're going to be utilizing, if you're going to be pulling reports for your team, for yourself, actually trying to associate an ROI and a value, you're going to definitely be using the date range feature. Also, number 4 is the export and shortcut menu. So this is where obviously you can start saving reports. You can schedule them to be emailed to you if that's daily, weekly, or monthly. You can share these. You can download them as PDFs. So you can do a lot of different kind of cool things with the export and shortcut menu. So it's nice to know that that's there. And then last but not least is the search function. This is going to be like, so for instance, if we're giving this presentation and you forget where the mobile report is, that I talked about today, you could simply just type in mobile. It'll pull the reports that are all related to that, and you can kind of go there as well. So 5, again, really important things to kind of know about beyond just the analytics that we're going to be talking about here today. So one of the more important pieces here, so awesome analytics. So what's important to know is that these 8 analytics that you're seeing here, we're going to go through them individually, are important because any report that we pull up from here on out is essentially going to have these stats that are essentially used to tell the story. So if we pull up the, again, the geo report showing all the cities that traffic's coming from. It's going to show us the users, the new users, the sessions for that location. If we pull up a device report, or we pull up, if it's Google compared to direct traffic, all these different types of things, really what we're getting at is any report from here on out is going to use these awesome analytics to kind of compare with each other to really kind of tell you the story about what that report is telling you. So, but obviously we need to kind of know what these 8 analytics are and 8 metrics are actually, again, measuring. So the first one is called users. Users are simply, if you want to almost think about as people. And so users are the number of users that visited a site. So in this example, we had 1,713. Now we don't know the date range, but whatever this date range was within there, we essentially had 1,713 people come to the site. New users is going to essentially tell us via Google's kind of tracking mechanisms and cookies, how many of them were new. So how many of them hadn't been to your site? And usually a good rule of thumb is within 30 days. So that's usually going to be kind of what's classified as a new user, a lot of times within Google. And then also then moving on to sessions. This is also a really important one, distinction between users and sessions. So users, again, are going to be the amount of people that came, and then sessions are going to be the amount of times those people came. So in this example, what we're essentially seeing is we had 1,713 people come to the site 1,958 times. So obviously that's telling us that we had some people come back multiple times and had a session on our site. So then we start getting into some math. So number of sessions per user, it's just doing some math there. So now we're saying that, we have every time someone comes to the site, they're visiting the site approximately 1.14 times. Then we also have page views. So the 1,713 people that came to the site over those 1,958 times, they visited 3,643 pages. So you can start to kind of see that we're just adding more and more kind of data to this and getting a little bit more qualitative. Then pages per session is essentially telling us every time someone comes to the site, on average, how many pages are they viewing? In this example, we're just doing math, and we see that it's 1.86. Then we move into average session duration. So again, this is just adding more data. So every time that they come, so of those 1,958 times that the 1,713 people came to the site, they approximately spent 56 seconds each time they came to the site on our site. And then last but not least is going to be bounce rate. So bounce rate is essentially calculating how many times did people look at one page on the site and then bounce out. So this is a lot of times back buttons and things like that. So in this example, it is 68.95% of times that people came to the site, they only looked at one page and they got out of there. Now you might be asking yourself, well, Ben, these numbers look great and this is, again, good, but what is a good number? What is a bad number? So there's a couple things to that. One is that I'll go over some industry standards here, but what you really want to start tracking, no matter where you are, if you're a new site, maybe an old site, if you've been doing digital marketing a long time or a short time, you really want to start working with the compare feature and seeing your growth or decline month over month, quarter over quarter, or year over year. That's going to be the important parts. This is honestly mainly to kind of set a benchmark for yourself. Because again, I'll go into some of these industry standards in a little bit to kind of give you an idea of what to look at. But just because you're either higher or lower them doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good or bad thing. In general, it does, but it's also that there's a lot of factors involved, and I'll get into some of them. So one of the first ones we look at is pages per session. So pages per session, a lot of times we want to see that as high as possible because that means that people are viewing, again, more pages on your site. Well, here's also kind of one of those indicators is on average, we try to see if we can get that number to, again, as close to 3 as possible. The methodology behind that is they come into the site on a page, they look at maybe another page, and then they go to your contact page. But again, that's just one example there. The idea though is the more pages you have, more often than not, your pages per session should be kind of higher. If you only have 5 pages, it's really hard for someone to visit 3 pages on average when you only have a 5-page website. But if you have products and you have, 468 pages, most likely we should probably even see that, again, we want to see that number higher because we have 468, again, if they're pages and products that people can kind of be looking at. So you kind of have to balance that a little bit of how many pages your site kind of, essentially has. But an average site, we really do want to see that. We want to try to get that into at least 2 and see if we can get that into 3. So this example we're seeing here is a little bit below average if we're looking at that, but they also might want to look at, again, has that declined over time? Has that increased over time? That would also tell more of the story. Also, average session duration is also a little bit different because it's also going to be dependent on your industry or what your business is trying to do or sell. What I mean by that is a lot of times, like for instance, if we take this example here of 56 seconds, sometimes I tell people is, most people's are usually around, I'd say 30 seconds to a minute and a half, but we get some that are way high. We might get some that are way low. What I try to tell people to do is take an opportunity, take your phone out and Yep. Take your phone out and essentially then just try to see what you can accomplish within that time frame. So this, I would set my timer for 56 seconds and I would kind of go through my site. I will be honest, you'll probably be surprised at how much you can actually glean from a website in, like, for instance, 56 seconds. That might not seem a lot. It actually is quite a bit of time when we look at it. But here's the other thing too, is again, we have to understand our industry. So in our business. So like I have a client that does emergency ice dam removal. Well, again, when people are, again, have an emergency with their, again, with their roof, they need emergency ice dam removal service. They come to the site, their pages per session are awful. Their average session duration is awful if we went after standards, but the website still successfully does what it wants to because, again, it's getting people in, quickly converting them, and then getting them to fill out a form or most likely call a phone number. So, but then I also have, for instance, some legal clients. Let's take, for instance, a divorce attorney who's one of our clients. Their pages per session and their average session duration is very high. And you can obviously kind of see because the user that is potentially kind of debating that decision of hiring someone or going through that process is probably not just a quick process. So they're most likely looking at more pages. They're probably spending more time on the site vetting it out. So there is going to be a little bit of what does your business sell? And those are kind of, potentially maybe a little bit more extreme examples, but hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of maybe where you would be on that spectrum. And like I said, is right now, if you were to go look at your analytics, set that as a benchmark. Or if you've had analytics running for years, go back and see what that benchmark was from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and start to see the, maybe an improvement or decline and kind of start from there. And last but not least is bounce rate. So bounce rate, believe it or not, is on average approximately 50 to 65%. So if we get way, again, a lot higher than that, that could be a concern. That might be, for instance, sometimes if we have a very high bounce rate, we might want to look at to see if A, we have some spam traffic coming in. B, if we're running Google ads, sometimes that can actually contribute. A lot of times we'll see a higher bounce rate for ads because maybe you have specific landing pages that they can only visit one page and bounce out. There's some factors there. Also, maybe it's the speed of your site, or maybe there's something wrong with it on mobile or desktop, one or the other. So like there's some different things, and we'll kind of go over those as we go in the presentation. But really what this does is that we can essentially kind of identify, again, what's happening with some of these analytics and set that benchmark and then see where some of those, if we run the geo report, if we run the mobile report, if we run the Google report, we can actually see a little bit further kind of story. So ideally with bounce rate is you want to try to get that as low as possible, but really there's no secret sauce to that. We just want to have a good website that has good content that kind of captures people to kind of get them to go kind of forward. And one last thing I'll just mention with bounce rate too is over time, we actually have seen that increase. And part of that has to do with because Google's more sophisticated and a lot of times can send people to a specific page instead of having them kind of go to the homepage and bounce around. The other thing too is we've also seen attention spans kind of, again, go, again, lower as well. So if the website doesn't load fast enough, if there's sometimes too much text, we may get someone to kind of bounce, again, out as well. So just knowing that there are some societal kind of influences that also happen to that too. Elizabeth, sounds like we have a question.
Yes, we have a couple questions here. So in the analytics, can I see the number of users and new users on a specific page, like the homepage, product page, like promotion page?
Yep, we'll actually get into that at a later point, but that is something you are able to see.
And then the next one is they're curious to see pre-built reports in Google Analytics.
Yep, everything that we're talking about today is the pre-built reports. So, again, the customized reports that you would be building would be something that would be done. Again, we don't really talk about that in this presentation, but that is something you can do. But know that every report that we're going to talk about from here on out is a pre-built report and is built by Google and is going to go into those different types of categories we're going to get into. So with that said, is just kind of, again, I just want to touch base a little bit on admin real quick. There's just a couple things I want to kind of talk to you guys about, and then, sorry about that. And then we'll kind of get into it. So the first is the admin section. So first and foremost, know that this is a single sign-on method. This is just like any Google product. You don't need to hand over your login to people. You can just give them access, and you can limit the access. You can do all that kind of fun stuff. So it is kind of nice that you're able to kind of do that. Also, you can set up filters in the admin section. So the big one I always like to kind of tell people is maybe you want to filter your traffic away from the office or at home so it's not being recorded. You can actually set up IP filters, and you can filter out your IP if you would like. Also, you can manage automated reports. I know, remember we talked about in the share feature of all the reports on the screen, you can actually set up to have these emailed to you. Well, this is where you can actually manage those to make sure it's going to the correct email, to make sure that it's going to the correct frequency, the time frame, everything like that. And then last but not least, to know, basically about the admin section, this is also where your tracking info is. So if you rebuild your website, you want to make sure that it's correct. You're just, maybe installing analytics for the first time. This is where you're going to get your tracking information, is the admin section. So like I kind of talked about, there are 5 main kind of categories. We're going to be mainly dealing with 4 of them. So the 5 are going to be real-time, audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. And so the ones that we're going to be going over are audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. We're not going to really spend much time on real-time, but what I will say about real-time is more of a fun report than because it's going to tell you literally what's happening on your site in that moment. What I will say about real time is if you're ever worried that analytics is not installed correctly or not recording, what I always tell people to do is pull up real time analytics on your desktop and then just go to your website on your phone. And within seconds, you should see, again, your phone pop up on your, again, on your screen. Now, if you have an IP filter, obviously make sure that you're on mobile network or things like that. But my point being is real time can be really helpful for that. Or it can also be kind of fun to also look at that if you are doing a,
obviously you're going to give me money.
If you are doing, Elizabeth, can we mute that person, please?
Well, I'm trying to figure this out.
The principle of it is showing up.
Perfect, thanks. And so, again, when it comes, real time can also be beneficial that if you're running an event or you're doing those types of things and you have people coming to your site, it's kind of fun to be able to kind of see that. But for the most part, honestly, the more value and more where you're going to spend more of your time is going to be audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. And we're going to go into each one of those, so don't worry. Okay, so the first, again, report, and the first one we're going to talk about is the audience. This is kind of the main report that a lot of people kind of start with, because the other thing to kind of know is if we go back here just one quick second, is that, again, when we start with audience or even kind of real time at that point, as you go further down, you're going to get to more qualitative traffic. Again, towards the top, it's going to be more quantitative traffic. So audience, for instance, is going to be more qualitative than real time, but still one of the more on the quantity data than more qualitative data. So with that being said, here are some things that you can get with audience. So the first is we got those basic reports of who's just coming to the site. That was the awesome analytics one. That's more of like just our audience report. Now remember, each one of those individual stats, though, we can get those in a main report, but now we're going to apply a certain type of filter or certain type of report parameter to it. So like, for instance, this one, we can actually get demographics. Google, actually has partners, and obviously with their technology, can actually, for the most part, for some of your traffic, pull in age ranges and gender. Now, what's kind of nice is when you pull these reports, you can actually see at the top what percentage of, users this is applying to. Another one you can also do is called the behavior report. Now, there's a main behavior report that we'll get into, but just the mini behavior report will start to tell you new users from returning users. Also the engagement level, how engaged are they kind of with the site, there. And two of my sometimes honestly favorite reports to at least get started with are the geo and the mobile reports. So geos, for instance, and I used this as an example earlier, this is going to show you, again, location. So we can go country, we can go state, and then we can go city. So then we can start to compare those awesome analytics. Eden Prairie compared to Minneapolis, Minneapolis compared to St. Louis, compared to LA. You can start actually comparing the different types of traffic, not only the, again, qualitative, but also quantitative, the amount of users, but also how many pages per session, how long were they on the site. So again, that's what I'm saying is that parameter now is really what's changing. We're going to use those awesome analytics for every single report, but we're just changing the main parameter. This example is the location of viewers that are being filtered through that. Also language, you can actually see what language people are pulling up your, again, your website in. Now that, you don't have to have this set. This is a lot of times what people are doing on their own, and Google obviously automatically translate if you've ever been to a website that has that. And so, but it's sometimes interesting to kind of know, even if you are bilingual or your demographic is or not, sometimes it can be beneficial to kind of know what language people are actually viewing your site on and kind of go from there. And last but not least, this honestly is one of my favorite reports. I know I mentioned that with the Geo one as well. But what's really cool about this report is this will actually split up the different devices of the traffic that is pulling in from your website. So you can actually see who's viewing your website from a desktop compared to mobile, compared to tablet. And so this can actually even get, again, we can go nitty gritty into this of looking at, okay, well, maybe our, again, pages per session is really high on one and low on the other. Well, is that because obviously a user on a mobile device is mainly going to be more quick and easy and just wants simple information? Whereas on average, if you are on a desktop, a lot of times you'll be spending more time on there as well. So we can get a little bit more information about, again, the device that is being used on our, again, for our traffic and for those users and those sessions. On top of the fact, one note I do like to kind of mention is that on average, over 50% of traffic is coming from mobile devices. So most of you, when you look at your Google Analytics reports, you're going to see that the majority of traffic most likely is coming from a mobile device. Now, if you're B2B, you still may be predominantly desktop, but I can guarantee you that if you've been having your mobile, Google Analytics running, your mobile reports and mobile traffic will show you from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 to 2021 that it's kind of essentially kind of just growing and growing from there. And so it's really important to look at the mobile report as you're starting to get into digital marketing, because it can tell you a lot of, for that person that's on your site, how are they experiencing your desktop compared to mobile, again, experience. There sometimes can be a drastic, again, difference there in something you may want to identify. And that's really, again, that's a really good point to kind of note as we go, again, as we go throughout the presentation as well, is if we do see something that's glaring, that's either, super positive green or super negative red, that we want to utilize that as an opportunity to kind of dive into it further and see what's causing that. If it's super green, how can we, again, continue to, again, what's creating that green and that huge growth that we can try to obviously duplicate that or even enhance that further. Or if we're seeing red, no matter if it's on a mobile report, a location report, obviously we'll get into more different types of reports if it's a page report or a channel report, is that how can we improve that channel because we're seeing it decrease? So that's really at the end of the day, what analytics is going to tell us is they're telling us a story, and then we have to see kind of the, again, the clues there, and then start to put that into motion of either, again, it could be validating, it could be discovering or implementing new things or current things as well. So the next one is going to be acquisition. This is actually my favorite overall type of, again, reports that we're going to see. I feel like it gives, small business owners the best value, especially when you're starting out. So acquisition is essentially going to show you, once people, or how did people get to your site? We talked about the people that were on your site on audience, but how did they actually get there? And so there are actually 8 different channels that someone can come from that's designated on Google or classified. So those are going to be, the first one is called direct. Direct is going to be someone like essentially typing in skollmarketing.com, or if someone was texted, again, maybe a thing and went directly there. It's going to be a direct access. A lot of times what direct traffic is going to tell us is these people know you somewhere, somehow. It could be that you gave them your business card, they're a returning customer, they're you, they saw you at an event. So direct traffic can also have some, again, some value or some connection to offline marketing. Like I was saying before, is if you have a billboard and you're having your web address on there, someone sitting at the bus stop may just type that in and go to it. If you're at an event or a trade show, or if that's virtual or in person or whatnot, and you have your website plastered right there saying, hey, go to this, well, a lot of times that can still influence direct. So direct can be a way to obviously, it's going to be part people that already know you and are connected to you, but then also may also, again, be able to start to tell you some of your story of your offline marketing as well. Organic traffic is going to be anything that's coming from a search engine. So obviously Google is going to be the predominant one, but you can also get, again, Yahoo, Bing, and, again, kind of the DuckDuckGo. You can get a breakdown of the other ones as well. And I'll get into, again, we'll show you some reports here in just a second. But what's kind of nice is if you click on any one of these, as you can see with the screenshot here, these are number 1 through 6 in this example. If I clicked on number 1, organic search, I can go more into detail and I can get that report that's showing me Google compared to Yahoo compared to Bing. If I click on the social report, I can get Facebook compared to Instagram compared to, again, Twitter. And again, I'll show you some examples here on the next slide, but just want to let you know and just remind, again, that it's not just the report that you're seeing. You can go further in depth to each one of these. So with the social report it is going to track any social media. Now, again, these are predetermined by Google. And the reason I just say that is sometimes I'll get into referral traffic here in just a second, but sometimes, social traffic can get misplaced into referrals sometimes because technically it is a referral source. But really, again, Google does a pretty good job. And what they're essentially doing is they're tracking the traffic that came from a social media platform. So what that essentially means is that it's traffic that, it's not the likes or the shares or all of that kind of stuff that happened on Facebook. It's who clicked a post on Facebook and actually went to your website. So that's really, that could be super powerful because a lot of times people are wanting to know, okay, well, how many people did I get from my SEO services on Google? How many people did I get from, social media for me posting on Facebook and Twitter this whole week? Well, again, you can start to kind of track that here. Next is going to be referral. So referral is traffic coming from any website that's not a social media site, as well as not a search engine. So the important thing here is, like I said, sometimes you'll get, some social traffic in there if it's accidentally misplaced by Google. But a lot of times the majority of traffic here is going to be, for instance, maybe you're part of the Better Business Bureau. Maybe, again, you have a Yelp account and sometimes Yelp will be in social as well. You sometimes have to look where some of these are coming from. But maybe if you're listed on startribune.com for the top 10 pizza places and they link to your, site. If you have a sister site and you say, hey, again, let's go back, again, kind of here, go back and forth, you're able to kind of, again, be able to see that. So referral traffic is pretty much anything that's not a social media site and not an organic site. So it's going to be a third-party site within there. And this is also where spam traffic can also live. So it's important to kind of, again, look at that and kind of, again, realize that as well. Also, again, then we also have paid traffic. So, again, with paid traffic, it's going to be anything that, again, that is going to be like with Google AdWords. So if you're running that, but, again, like you're running Google AdWords, you can see them in Google Ads, but you can also pull them into analytics to start to compare those to other traffic sources. So also,
sorry, Ben.
Gotcha. Yeah, do you mind if we just wait? I just want to get through all the channels here real quick.
You got it.
Yep. So the next is going to be display. So display traffic is very similar to paid traffic, but Google actually, again, discern those two. So again, if you're running ads, that's again going to be just another ad that you're running. If you're not running ads, then you won't see that, and it's nothing to kind of worry about. Next is going to be email. So this is where a lot of times, like for instance, if you're using MailChimp, Constant Contact, MailChimp, those different types of again, newsletter or mail type of platforms, you can actually integrate your Google Analytics into them and then be able to actually pull to see who's coming from those email newsletters. So, again, it does take a little bit of integration, but it can be nice to kind of be able to see that. And then last but not least, there's always going to be sometimes that Google can't see where someone's coming from. So this is actually throughout all of analytics, is that if you ever see other or not provided, a lot of times that's because Google either A, is blocking access to that, like keywords here, and I'll get into that in just a second, or that they, for some reason, can't read that, sometimes a glitch, or because of someone may has a blocking software or something like that, like with that. Elizabeth, you said we had a couple questions?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. So let's see, this person had analytics connected to their WordPress site, but they've now switched to a Wix site and they're not sure how to attach it using a UA code instead of the G code. And they're wondering if you have any tips on that. Maybe others are having the same issue or have experienced the same thing.
Well, so a G code is going to be, again, a verification code to get into your account. A UA code is actually going to be a universal analytics code. So you're most likely kind of actually mixing those up. A G code is going to be simply just a verification code to get into an account. The UA code is actually the tracking code.
All right. Thanks.
Perfect.
All right.
Awesome. Well, so getting back to the presentation with the keywords is that, so I kind of mentioned that you might see other or not provided on some reports. Well, keywords is one of them. So way back in the day, Google used to actually allow us to actually see the keywords that someone typed in, to actually be able to see what they typed in and then they got to our site. Unfortunately, because of privacy policies changing, that is not the case anymore. And so what we have to do now is we can use a platform called Google Search Console in order to be able to at least get some of that data back. So Google Search Console is a separate platform. You would sign up for that there, and then you would connect it into Google Analytics. And then last but not least is Google AdWords. Again, there's actually a whole section for it, not even just one of the channels. So I just like to kind of mention that is, again, if you run Google Ads, most likely you'll be viewing most of your ad metrics on Google Ads or Google AdWords. Or you can pull them in here if you want to also, again, view them individually on Google Analytics. It makes it really nice if, for instance, you're dealing with a team and you don't want to be giving them different types of reports and everything. If you just want to give them one type of report on Google Analytics and one of them is Google Ads, that can be really kind of beneficial. So. Okay, so here is the, again, the area where I was kind of telling you, just to give you an example of what the screenshots look like when we actually click into those acquisitions channels. So the one on the far left is referral. So if I click into, again, referral traffic, I can see where my traffic is coming from. So this example here is, again, a platform called Upcity management-hq.com. Maybe we're mentioned in a blog there for this example, clutch.co. So you can start to see, again, some of these, like the number 2 right there, website bot traffic.xyz, you can definitely tell that that is going to be spam traffic. So again, it's also important to kind of realize that, because this is where, again, as we get further down with the type of audience, acquisition, behavior, conversion type of analytics we're talking about here, it's important to realize that, each one is going to tell us more of a story. If we looked at audience and we had, again, a huge number of people come to the site, but we had a huge bounce rate and no one's staying on the site. Well, if we get to acquisition, we may find that for whatever reason, we got hit with a bunch of spam and that kind of threw off our analytics. Well, then we could look to kind of, again, take that out and actually start to kind of see what our real analytics are from there as well. But again, it's going to kind of tell us a story. Social media, being able to kind of tell, Facebook compared to LinkedIn, compared to Instagram traffic. You can kind of see the examples here. In this example, 651 people came from Facebook, 31 came from Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. The bottom one is going to be Google or the search engine. So we can actually see not only the amount of traffic, but what's also important is if you see the percentage next to anything, when you pull up a report like this is the market share, the percentage of that traffic. So like, for instance, Google, this is telling us that 95.6% of organic search traffic is coming from Google. 2.4% is coming from Bing. So this is also important when we start to kind of talk about why we focus on Google so much is the industry standards around about 80%, anywhere from 70, 80% market share for Google. But specifically, especially for small businesses and in the Midwest, we a lot of times see that closer to 90%. So a lot of times, 90% of your traffic from a search engine is going to come, again, most likely from Google. And then if you do direct traffic, that's the report on the right-hand side here. You can see the direct page that they actually, again, were maybe sent or they typed in to kind of go to. This again can be helpful that, maybe you create a URL to use for your offline event. Maybe you're holding a, again, some type of seminar, workshop, some type of community event. Maybe you do a different domain or you do something /event or whatever it may be. And you can actually track to see how many people go to that and actually, again, start to even track offline traffic as well. Okay, so next is going to be behavior. So we talked about who's on the site, how they got there. Now we want to know, what did the users do on the site? And this actually goes back to that one question we had as well. So this is where we can actually see the site content. So we can actually start to see the top pages viewed on the site and the corresponding analytics. So we can actually start, again, with the example previously when I know someone was asking, well, can we see if we can, again, pull up the product page or the promotion page or the home page? The answer is yes. So we can actually go page by page and not only see the potential of the growth or the decline of just the amount of traffic that's going to that page, but then we can actually get a further in-depth report and actually see some of the other types of analytics via the awesome analytics that are associated with those pages as well. So this can be super powerful because, again, now we know who they are, where they came from, but what are they doing on the site? We can also, if you have site search set up, so this is not what people searched on Google, but if you have any type of search functionality on your site already, you definitely should connect that to Google Analytics because you can actually start to track who, again, what people are searching for on your site and what are the search results there. This could be super beneficial because if you have things that people consistently keep searching for, maybe you want to bring that to the forefront. Again, it's obviously good to know what people are doing on your site and how they're utilizing your different technology that you're putting out there, and site search can be one of those. Same thing with site speed. This also gives us an idea of kind of the quality of the experience that someone is having on your site. So we can start to kind of see, how fast is our website, begin performing on an average basis? Are we spiking? Are we kind of continuing, increasing? Obviously, increasing is bad. If our site is getting slower and slower and taking longer to load, that could potentially even have an impact on our bounce rate, on our average session duration, all of those different kind of things. And then last but not least is called event tracking. This can be super powerful. This is essentially tracking a single type of action. Meaning that, like, for instance, if I want to track, if I maybe have a link that says sign up here and it goes to an affiliate link somewhere else, again, if I have a partnership or whatever, I can track how many people actually clicked on that button. If maybe a PDF download, again, I want to see how many times did someone download this PDF or this white paper that we just created. So anything that's a single action, either clicking a link or clicking a download or clicking a button, you're able to kind of do that, and that's called event tracking. Now, you do have to set that up individually, but Google has a really good kind of easy flow kind of way to actually set that up for you. Or if you do need help, what's kind of nice is once you set these up once, then you're set to go. So if you got someone, again, could be like, for instance, if you needed our help, if you had someone internally, if you had another person that could do that, once they set it up, it's great because, again, you don't really have to worry about it there, and you can start seeing these reports and that tracking mechanism go. Last but not least also is the graph to the right. This also is, again, kind of shows you a little bit of a behavior flow. It's not the easiest thing to read and to kind of look at, but what it's essentially showing you is the big green box that's closer to the left. That's essentially saying these are how many people came in from the home page. Now, from the home page, what page did they go to next? In this example, it was the company page, then back to the home page for some reason. Maybe they refreshed. Then they went to the events page. Some people went to the contact page. Some people went to the blog page. And then you can see once they got to those pages, where did they go next? So again, it can help you kind of what we kind of call user behavior flow to kind of see how people are coming into your site and then what are they doing next. If we see huge chunks of red, that might be an indication to kind of dig further into that of why are people stopping there and not maybe going forward. Now, maybe you have it set up that that's what it's meant to be. Maybe it's to the end of the interaction. Like for instance, a contact page is usually a pretty good indicator that if you see a lot of red at the end of a contact page, most likely that's they did what you wanted them to do, maybe and fill out the contact page or called you and now they're done. But it maybe if they're doing that on the home page or one of the service pages, and we don't have a contact form on the service pages, maybe again, maybe we should look into that further. We should look at it on a mobile device, on a desktop, and things like that. So again, kind of telling us the story of those and being able to kind of then apply that from there. Then the last type of analytics or type of reports that we can do are conversion reports. Now, these are essentially going to do, okay, we know who's on the site. We know where they came from. We know now what they're doing on the site, but are they doing what we want them to be doing? And so that's essentially what happens with conversion tracking. So this is where you can set up a multi kind of step or multi-action process to be able to kind of track. So like for instance, maybe it's, filling out a contact form. Maybe it's scheduling for a free demo. If you have e-commerce, maybe it's purchasing something. It's something that's not just a simple click. It takes a little bit more. Sometimes a page visited. Maybe if you want to say, well, I want to track people that came in from a certain source, like a channel, and then visited 1 or 2 pages, I want to consider that an actual, again, kind of conversion. So a couple things with this is that Google has a lot of predetermined reports that you can kind of do. Like the biggest, honestly, the easiest one to kind of think about is a contact form. A lot of times, again, that's going to have a lot of value to you. And most likely that's where a lot of us can get leads from our website is people filling out a contact form. Well, we can go ahead and set up that conversion so that not only can we see, again, those conversions happening, but if we go back and you can actually see the, again, screenshot here at the bottom, if we, for instance, go back to the acquisition report, that will actually pull in conversions. So you can actually see conversions per channel. So we can actually start to see, well, okay, so we got 20 different conversions this month, but how many came from organic search? How many came from direct? How many came from social media? And this is where we can actually start to validate and put a value to not only, again, of getting those conversions, but also the channel that they're coming from and the marketing efforts that you're putting into them. And so the other thing to know too is there's a ton of predetermined reports that you can kind of, again, or predetermined templates, excuse me, that you can create these conversions. Another cool thing that you can do within the conversions is you can assign it a monetary value. So like, for instance, if someone fills out your schedule a free demo or schedule a free walkthrough, if it's at the reserve or, again, something like that, we could say, hey, there's a certain value to that. Now, again, obviously it's arbitrary, but then you can start to kind of apply that to maybe your marketing efforts. Now, obviously e-commerce is going to be able to pull in all of what you're selling. If you're selling a pair of sunglasses for $20, it's going to be able to say, okay, you sold that for $20 and it's going to apply that. But it is kind of nice that you can then even prioritize and say, okay, hey, hypothetically, if someone fills out a contact form, I'm going to say that's worth $50. If they do a demo, that's worth $100. If they, sign up for my newsletter, that's $5. You can just to kind of apply an arbitrary number to kind of help you, again, quantify and qualify what you're kind of doing on those platforms and being able to kind of associate a value to that. So with that said, and we can be kind of talking about this, but the whole idea with analytics is it's probably one of the only platforms that you'll hear me talk about if you've seen some of our other presentations, that just signing up for it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get higher ranking in Google, that you're going to do all that kind of stuff. But what it does though is it does help you validate. It starts to validate your again, putting in a return on investment on your marketing efforts. Again, how much are you putting into offline? How much are you putting into social media and actually seeing that return kind of come back? We can also use it to strategize, see maybe where we need to do some improvements, or we can optimize or take obviously something that's really working maybe for a page or for, a channel, and let's put some more into it. And then we can also maybe we discover new target markets. I've worked with, again, businesses that have used, like, for instance, the location report to see where people keep, again, visiting their site from, to see if, again, when they're looking to maybe put a new location for their business, if they can utilize that as another factor, that they have all these people that keep, again, coming to the website from a certain area, well, maybe we should move closer to them. I've worked with a couple, again, companies that have actually used that as one of the factors. It's not the only, of course, but the idea here is that you can discover new things about it. You can also discover potential things that aren't working very well, or if we see a decline, we can look to try to backtrace that to either marketing efforts, sometimes website neglect, digital marketing neglect, social media neglect. Again, we can start to kind of do that. And what's nice is, again, analytics is our numbers. So that, again, they're not really necessarily lying, but, again, the more we understand of them, the more that we can kind of tell a story. The numbers in themselves aren't going to be much. Like I said at the beginning, is that we need to kind of have that benchmark there for that, and then start to kind of build on top of it, either see the improvement, see the decline, and actually use these analytics to tell a story to not only what's happening on the site, but then also what is happening with our marketing efforts. So I hope this kind of gives you an introduction to Google Analytics and applying this to your business. If you take away one thing, please just make sure Google Analytics is running, because when you get to the point that you want to start looking at this, the data will be there. And really, it's just a matter of kind of getting your feet wet with this. I know this, a lot of times, this isn't the most fun thing for people to look at analytics and to do that type of stuff and to look at the reports. Some people it is, but it's okay just to kind of start, even if it's just getting yourself familiar with the quantitative data. Again, it's at least going to tell you some of the story, and you can start to feel more comfortable with it. And like we kind of mentioned before, is we have other workshops that we do. So I encourage you to check out those. We'll be doing some more, not only with the Reserve, but we have some other partners as well that are specific to analytics, but also other categories within digital marketing that we've also talked about here today, if that's social or SEO. So with that said, I do want to thank you guys, but I want to open it up to some questions, because I know we've got some more. And if you have any further questions for me, please put them in the chat and I'd be happy to answer them. Perfect. Elizabeth, what questions do we have?
All right. So is it possible to download Google Analytics as an app for the computer?
So it's a website for the computer, but it is an app for mobile devices. So I know some computers and tablets, they kind of blend. So there is an app if you have an app-based device, but otherwise it is also web-based as well. And I would say that is also a good thing to note too, is that the app-based ones are nice, but they're not going to give you nearly as much information. So if you're going to take this seriously, you're going to definitely want to spend some time on the desktop version, and then just look briefly over sometimes the mobile version, we get there, just because it can't go, because we just have smaller screens. There's just not enough space to go into in depth as the desktop can.
So let's see, this attendee says that they need to put code in our site to enable Google Analytics to capture data. How can we get this data that compares Yahoo, Facebook, etc., when we don't have access to their code?
Yep. So remember, again, Google Analytics is tracking traffic coming in from Yahoo, from Facebook. So when they're coming into your website, it's like having a force field around your website. And as they pass through that force field, they're reading all of the data of you. They're reading where you're located, where you're coming from, then they're tracking how long you're on there. So again, if you wanted to see, again, for Facebook, if you wanted to see obviously how many likes you're getting on Facebook, how many, again, people saw that post, that's on Facebook. But if they're coming from Facebook into your website, again, think about kind of having a force field around your site, and they're passing through it, which then, Google's collecting that data on them.
Does analytics give an insight into negative keywords?
So negative keywords are mainly going to be reserved for Google Ads. So they'll pull in if you're doing Google Ads, but negative keywords is a Google AdWords or an advertising, again, type of, again, keyword and term. It's not really used in, again, organic or, Google Analytics, just in general.
Okay. And this person is wondering if there's any way one can register for certification.
Yeah, so you can actually get certified in Google Analytics. You can also get certified in Google AdWords and some other, again, ones within Google. And so it's just a matter of taking some courses with, again, Google. I would just simply Google, again, Google Analytics certification or whatnot. And they actually have kind of their own program that you can, obviously take the training, then take the test, and then get certified from there. So the answer is yes, along with other ones too.
And is it free?
And yes, it is free.
Okay.
Yep, it is free. Yep. So that there are other programs out there that you can get third-party certifications, but again, Google's again, platforms are free.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go back up to this other one. This person would like you to do like a quick recap on what services we should link to analytics, Google Search
Yeah.
Console for keywords.
So yeah, so the main ones that you're going to want to link to Google Analytics. So obviously, so this is a great question. And so I think, Carol, it's coming from you. So again, really what we've got, Carol, here is that you've got the main platform of analytics. Now, some of the ones that you want to kind of connect to it are going to be, again, Google Search Console. Any type of email platform you're potentially using, again, like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, and then also your shopping cart or Google Ads if those are applicable. Those are kind of the four main ones. Now, those are the ones we want to attach to analytics. Now, the other thing to remember too is that we're going to want to try to set up conversions, which means then we're going to set that up within analytics and then connect that to our website. So there's a little bit of cross there, but when it comes to just pure platforms, Search Console, email, then again, e-commerce and AdWords, if those are applicable from there. Those are going to be the ones that you're really going to want to look at then.
Do we need advanced developers to help plug in the code into our site? Can we deploy this code to our site for a trial basis while we're exploring Google Analytics tool and its capabilities?
Yeah, so you don't necessarily need advanced developers. Obviously, it's hard for me to know because I don't know skill sets and stuff like that. But what I will say is they do make it very simple to try to put in there. So again, if you use any type of DIY builder, GoDaddy Web Builder, Weebly, Wix, Squarespace, any of those, it's very simple. You go to the admin section, you get what's called your UA code, and you just plop it in there. If you're using WordPress, you can actually look to do a plugin if you're not familiar with code. Otherwise, you might have to plug in the code depending on what your CMS, your content management system, like a WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, those types of things, that's what a CMS is called, is depending on what you're using there. So the answer really is no. And you can, again, add, and you can always take down that code at any point as well.
Are there any groups that one can join to learn this further?
If we're talking Google Analytics, I mean, there's always going to be courses out there. Again, we have a 2.0 course, so again, welcome there. Again, obviously there are again resources like LinkedIn. Google has their own, again, with their certification. So yes, there is. It's just a matter of what you consider a group and how you want to then learn that and apply that. So.
Great question.
Perfect. Well,
wow.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions. So again, I want to say thank you guys for coming. I know this can be of sometimes all the subjects that we do. We're just talking about metrics, analytics. I know sometimes it's not the most fun. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And like we said, stay tuned for the, again, the presentation and the recording that we're sending. Also, if I want to mention just a couple things too, is if you do have any questions, here's my information. Please feel free to reach out. Also know that check out our other workshops that are upcoming there. And if you have any questions about our services, please let me know. But know that we do offer free consultations. So if you want to talk about our services, that's great. This isn't a sales pitch. Again, for some of those people that were saying, hey, Ben, I just need to make sure that my analytics code is, running. Can you help me just make sure that it's installed? That's what I'm talking about. So if you need just some extra help with that, I encourage you just to reach out and schedule a free consultation. It's really just at, free time that we do to give back to the community like you guys, and knowing that we have a lot of these heady subjects that are sometimes hard to digest, and we just need a little bit more help kind of applying those. So if that's of interest to you, or you have more specific questions like that, feel free to reach out to me. Just simply send me an email, and I'd be happy to either answer any of those questions, guide you in the right direction, or set up a free consultation from there. So with that said, I want to say thank you guys and have a great day. Skål.